Hi, everybody. Happy Friday afternoon. Hope everyone's having a great conference. So we'll get started. Let's see. So my talk's entitled Accelerating Innovation, Using New Relic Software Analytics Cloud to Do More with Less. So I'm going to talk, I serve right now as the Chief Technology Officer for CURE International, and I'm also the product manager for an open source project called HospitalRun. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both those things, but that's not really what this topic is about. It's not really what the talk's about. So what I'm really here to talk about is how to use the tools that New Relic has for a small team to be able to get an awful lot done, right? And actually be able to move faster because you're using those tools well. So the work we've done gives us an opportunity to actually see some of that work in action, and we've picked up a couple tips along the way that, I'm sure everybody in this room might have some good ideas as well, but I'm the guy who's sharing a couple of them today. So if you want to find me, I'm on Twitter at Tangolama. Okay, so why is this 25 minutes worth your time? So we're going to just go through a couple slides around context. So who are we? What's the work that we do? Just to give you some sense about how did we get to a place where we've got something to say about what it's like to do startup-y projects. Share just a couple insights on things that we've been able to do with the tools that actually help us be more efficient. And then I'm going to show you a couple applications, some stuff that we're using with particularly New Relic insights in order to make our products better. Okay, so, and that's obviously, this gives you a sense we use APM a lot. So, okay, so context, what's so startup-y about CURE? Okay, so first of all, just talk about the organization I work for. We're an international nonprofit that has operations in 29 countries around the world. We've got hospitals in 10 of those countries, and our mission is to help kids with surgically correctable conditions, right? So we go into a country and we try to provide the highest quality of care to the least served population in that country. And we've been doing that for coming up on 20 years. So we've got 29 dots on the map, 1,500 employees around the world, but there's only about 45 of us in the US that are actually helping run the whole organization from a fundraising and oversight perspective. Okay, so CURE's awesome. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but as a part of that, one of the things that we do in my team is we build really innovative software products. Okay, so I came to work at CURE about 6 years ago, and at the time we couldn't tell the story of a single person who we were helping. So we're doing about 20,000 surgeries a year. We have no way to actually connect you with the people who are being served. So what we did is we built software that allows us to do real-time reporting on the people that are being served and gives people direct insight into the kind of work that we're doing, and actually makes it very participatory. So you can send get well messages to kids, all the communications brokered and managed, obviously, but it's actually giving people a real connection about how your support can make a difference in a kid's life on the other side of the world. It's really amazing stuff, and it's a privilege to get a chance to do it. But so we're building some really interesting software, and you can go onto the website, cure.org/CureKids, see people are in the hospital right now. That's just an example of a mobile experience that we're launching for Christmas, where we're asking people to send get well messages into the hospital. Okay, one of the other things we're doing is we're leading an open source project called HospitalRun. So we've got a problem that about 14,000 other facilities throughout the developing world have, which is that we don't have good solutions for how to do hospital information systems. So there have been other open source projects that have tried to tackle this in the past that I would say are well-intentioned, not necessarily always well implemented. And so we've taken on ourselves to say, we're leading a project that's a really modern project, built in Ember, Node, Couch, that takes usability extremely seriously. And we're trying to build a solution that's manageable and deployable and sustainable, for a few $1,000, not for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this is another project that we're involved in. So again, an innovative software activity that's happening inside the organization. If you want to check it out, hospitalrun.io, please do. Okay, so what makes us startup-y is that we're doing all that with 5 people. And I'm one of those 5 people, and I'm standing here right now not doing any of that work. So we've got an extremely resource-constrained environment, and those aren't the only things that we're doing, right? So we're also managing the IT infrastructure. We're building products, managing the computers, and then in some cases, sometimes getting a chance to talk about it, right? So we've got some severe constraints. I think it was Camille yesterday was talking about like being in a startup and having 30 engineers, which I agree is not a lot of people, and I cannot imagine having 30 engineers, what I'd be able to do with 30 engineers. So, how could we do all this work? Well, the answer is we're full stack users. So everything we do, New Relic's touching all of it, right? So on the cure.org, the CUREkids side, we're using everything that New Relic makes in order to help make that platform better. We've got a product that we use in our hydrocephalus training program called HydroOS that actually we use the monitoring APM capabilities in order to keep that up and running. And then in HospitalRun, we're using APM browser, and then we're actually starting to integrate some insights into how we're managing that system. When it comes to HospitalRun, actually, one of the interesting things is we've got a locally installed server in a hospital. It's like an appliance computer that's talking to a cloud-based solution. And so because of Couch, like we get all the replication for free. But what we're actually doing is we're running the agent on both those things to understand like not only what's the performance, but like what's going wrong, when it's going wrong, when we have those systems up and running. So to give you some, just the context there is the reason we've got something to say about this is like we use the product a lot, and it helps us get an awful lot done. Okay, so based on that, taking a step back from the fact that we happen to be a charity, what we're doing, I think, is very analogous to a lot of innovation projects, whether you're in a larger organization where you're trying to like start something new, or you actually are literally starting something new. Here's some things that we've learned about how to use the products well that can hopefully transfer to what you're doing. So item number one, okay, I put this slide in here just like so there's like some baseline. So if you're running a product or service and you don't have APM, you're not really running a product or service, and you either don't value your time or you don't really think the project is particularly serious. So I mean that's just a reality. If you're going to do this, like you need to have monitoring. You need to understand what's going on inside your platform. Again, Camille talked about that yesterday, which I think was absolutely spot on. You can spend a bunch of time trying to figure out what to do, or you can just go out and spend the money to actually put a good solution in place. And obviously, I think New Relic's the best. So, okay, so item number two. This is something that we learned when we were going through actually our sort of second revision of our CUREkids platform. At the time, we were actually trying to start to integrate insights into the application to do some really interesting stuff I'm going to talk about later. But one of the side benefits was, so I had to go ahead and install the agent on my local machine, and I started realizing like, hey, this thing I wrote is crap, right? So like I was actually starting to catch like profiling issues. There were some significant performance problems with some of the rewrite work that we had done. And I was actually picking that up in the development environment in my like local laptop as I'm running the system. So just a tip, I think it's a good idea. I mean, if you've got the opportunity to do this, like go ahead and install the agent locally while you're doing work and start catching issues like just at the very beginning. Item number two of some tips that I got to share. Okay, so use synthetics, but use it strategically. So synthetics came out last year. I think a lot of times when you think about like these types of like monitoring, it's like, you know, some people sort of treat it like a testing platform. You know, you can think like, if I'm not going to do all of this, then I'm not going to do any of this, right? And what I'd encourage you to do is the same thing that we've done. So like we don't have the time to stop and write monitoring tests for every single section of our site. So what we do is pick the 3 or 4 things that are the most embarrassing items. You know, like if these things do not work, we are in serious trouble. So I don't know if anyone knows this, people are not just scanning around the internet looking for ways to give away their money, right? So when they come to your website, in order to give you some money, you really need to make sure that you can help them give you money. So one of the things we did is we went ahead and made sure like the donation process has got some synthetics tests in it, and just, you know, as you're making those decisions about what to invest that time in, recognize, of course, you're creating more code, right, that you're going to have to maintain. So just be very strategic about that. Just as an example, this was a particularly egregious, terrible day that I picked where it was taking, you're getting the initial response from the page in basically under a second, but it's taking over 12 seconds from some locations to actually load the page. That's a problem, and so we need to know about that and do something about it. And what's great is that I'm getting that profiling from 4 different places across the planet. So if you haven't used that, highly recommend doing that. It's going to save you a bunch of time. Okay, for the rest of my talk, actually, I'm going to talk mostly about insights. And so I want to go on to the topic of product management. So we're involved in a really innovative activity. So nobody had ever built something like this before. This is not just about showing you a before and after photo of a person that you helped. That's great, and that's really good. Like, we love providing that validation. We're actually trying to provide a platform for real-time communication in a really structured, responsible way. And so that comes with all sorts of really interesting problems because you're creating something someone hasn't done before, which of course is like what we're all doing when we start a brand new project, right? I mean, if someone had already done it, then you just go use that product, right? So for us, we didn't really that causes all sorts of marketing problems for you because you're not sure how to talk about it, but it also causes some sort of product management problems, like you're not really sure what do people want to do with this system. So what I'd encourage you to do, and what we've done, is rather than spend a bunch of time doing user interviews, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, that's a very good, productive thing to do. What might be more productive is to actually just capture the metrics in your software about how people are using the software, and then start to make decisions about what features you're going to invest in more from there. So this is, again, like something where you might think like, well, once we get the whole thing up and running, we'll go ahead and plummet for some analysis. But I'd encourage you, just make that part of the initial development project, because it's going to start to give you actionable data as soon as possible about how to make your system better. So in our case, we're publishing these profiles, and they've got things like a condition and a country, age, and we want to understand what kinds of stories are people engaging with. And so this is just in case anybody hasn't done it before, just a little code example of what it actually takes, the infinitesimal amount of time it takes to go ahead and start collecting this specific information in Insights. Just a story. Of course, we tried to do this without a platform like this about 3.5 years ago. Spent 6 weeks plumbing the whole system to start capturing this data and slamming it all into a relational database. And it faithfully captured all that information and almost destroyed the site. So it was, and of course there's no way to get any information out of it. We were way, way overwhelmed, recognizing, we didn't have any idea how much information we were actually going to be asking for. And so, I mean, it was just an absolute failure. So in this case, I did this change, I think, it took me a day for us to start capturing this data. And of course, it produced itself into a dashboard that our marketing team now uses on a weekly basis to go back and look at what the trending stories are. And even we're capturing things like who the most active users are on our system. So we can go back and thank those people for their advocacy, right? Because it's not just about your money, we actually care about your attention. So what stories are people really engaging with? What countries? What's the financial impact? We've got this metric we're trying to drive towards, which is how much engagement we want to create through this platform on a weekly basis. So all this was really, really easy to capture. So remember that, because that actually leads into my next topic, which is around applications. So there's some really awesome stuff you can do using Insights to actually start to direct user behavior and actually change the behavior, the way your application functions as well. And so I've got just a couple examples around that. So that example I shared earlier, where we plumbed our CUREkids platform to capture all this data around all the demographic information around these stories and how people are engaging with it, including what the actions are that they're taking. All that data is sitting in Insights, right? So one of the things we were able to do is actually so it's what I call our new Relic Inception. So we took all this data from our website, shoved it into Insights, then we queried it back out of Insights, pulled it back into the website, and started actually presenting things like our statistics, or starting to let people know what the trending stories are this week. So what are the stories that people are finding interesting? who's engaging with what, and even who the most recent profiles are that have been captured. That was really, really easy to do. Technical detail. So technically, you could just rely on insights. I mean, it's fast enough that you could just be pulling that data and pulling it directly into your production system. But of course, we didn't want to do that. So what we do is like we actually schedule it as a task. And every time an action occurs, we go out and tell this task to say like, hey, go refresh this information. And that looks a little bit like this, right? So we run a query, like fire that query off in order to like figure out things like what are the most active profiles, and then pull that information back into the website and present it in order to start to influence the way people are engaging. So that's kind of cool. I think that's like a neat application of the system. And there's just another example that's probably more directly related to our operational work. So this idea is like, so we've got this hospital information system platform, this open source project called HospitalRun, and it's got all these modules in it. And our key driver is like we're trying to create usability. We're trying to create a system, not that physicians or practitioners have to use, but something that actually helps them do their jobs better. That's a very, very novel idea in healthcare. And one of the reasons that it makes it interesting to do this work is because it's the intersection of nonprofit and healthcare, both of which have terrible technology. And so you get the opportunity to do really, really innovative stuff like this. Okay, so what if we could actually use insights in order to essentially help the physician that's logging into this system interact with the information better as well, right? So the home screen, perhaps when I log in, is actually defined by data that's being captured by my analysis tool. Okay, so it's just another code example here, right? So this is an Ember app, so we're using the browser APIs in order to do things like capture an interaction at the point that a physician clicks in on a particular patient or chooses to do things like, say, order tests for that particular patient. They probably don't want to take the time at that point to like stick that patient's ID or take an additional action to say like, hey, I need to make sure I keep track of what's going on with this. That's okay because the software can do that for us, right? So we can actually push all this information into our analysis engine. It makes it possible for us to, like, of course, do some really interesting reporting eventually about how the system's being used, helps us make better decisions about what to do with the product long term. But it also could create something kind of like this, and to be full disclosure, this is really slideware at this point. But the idea is I log into my HospitalRun instance, and then I've got the breakdowns of like the last 3 patients that I interacted with. And this is just a widget that we've got in the system anyway that gives me like all the primary and secondary diagnosis information and like all the basic information I need about those patients. But because I put that information into Insights, possible for me to like pull that back out very easily and then eventually start to do some things where we can start suggesting what other people are doing in the system, make that a part of your own interaction with the hospital platform. Okay, so I think that leaves me with a couple minutes for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
So it seems like you're using insights to be a data store for your actual application business logic, right?
No, that's not accurate. So I'd say like things like something like a piece of trending data like that we'd use for, say, building a home screen. Okay, sorry, yeah. Okay, so the question was, he asked, are we using insights for application business logic? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I guess you're generalizing it. My point is that you're using it to drive key functions in your application.
Okay, sorry, I might have misunderstood you. So your question was?
Are you using insights to create features for your application?
Yes, okay, so the question was, are we using insights in order to create features for our application? And the answer is yes.
And so from there, I'm curious about, are you concerned about there's no SLA that I know around insights that can go down, equals data, maybe?
Yeah, so the question is, am I concerned about the fact that, about SLAs, essentially about uptime on insights and reliability, right? So one of the things that we do is we actually go ahead and we store that data locally so that all that information gets crunched in Insights, we query it, and then we'll store it locally to actually build this specific screen page feature, right? So I'm not doing the analysis on it, nor am I like wholly relying on an outside system, any outside system, to be the basis for how a screen is built. But what I'm doing is like on a regular interval, rebuilding that data from Insights. So if it turns out, like say, if there were some sort of performance blip, and like, or just a connectivity issue on my side, and I lost connection there, I've still got the old data, like sitting in essentially like a temp variable that gives me the ability to.
Same as on insert and retrieval?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Anyone else? Okay. Then I'll go to my last slide. So this is the. Just want to introduce you to. This is who my primary customer is. So this little guy's name is David. He grew up in the really famous slum in Nairobi, Mathare slums. Was born with a congenital birth defect that's actually the most common congenital birth defect, I think, in the world. The incident rate is the same everywhere in the world, about 1 in every 750 cases, a child's born with a condition called clubfoot. It's completely treatable if you deal with it before the age of 2 through a casting process that our organization does, where we run countrywide clinics where it's possible to take care of infants, and for about $400, take somebody who is going to be crippled and make them someone who's running for the rest of their life. But there are some situations where kids, like David, reach the age of 7, 8, 9, 10 years old without this kind of treatment. So we run surgical hospitals where we take kids like this and actually help straighten their feet. So he's going to get a chance to go to school. He is going to school now. The life of his entire family has been radically transformed based on the fact that we had the opportunity to intervene at this particular moment. One of the things that's really awesome is that the kind of work that we all do with software is actually helping enable things like this, making it possible for kids on the other side of the world to lead normal lives. And so hopefully, as you're engaged in the kind of work you're doing in your startups and your internal innovation projects, I just encourage you to think about what kind of social impact you can have as well with the work you're doing, whether it's with your time, with the products that you're building, or just, maybe even what you should be doing with your career. So that's all.